Rainbows climb, clouds drift by, Brollies fly through a magic sky. Is it real? Are they dreams? Nothing appears to be what it seems. Then far away I can hear a voice in the weatherhouse call out a name. Mr. Brolly, it's time for the rain.
Harry was trying to go to sleep, but no sooner had he closed his eyes than he opened them again. Tucked up beside Harry in bed were his toys, Elephant and Hippo. Snake, as always, lay on the rug by the door, and Bird was perched on the chest of drawers. Harry stared down at his patchwork quilt. It was different from other quilts. Instead of flowery scraps of material, it was made of little embroidered pictures of rainbows, clouds, stars and planets, and great flashes of lightning in a dark and stormy sky. It had been made a long, long time ago. On the wall hung Harry's weatherhouse. If the day was going to be fine and sunny, Mrs. Brolly came to her door. If the day was going to be wet and cloudy, Mr. Brolly came out. But of course, they never came out together, for it is impossible for a day to be both wet and dry at the same time. But what would happen if they both came out together? Wondered Harry, and he sat up and stared at the weatherhouse. As he stared, the doors seemed to grow larger. His bed grew smaller, and he found himself at the entrance of the weatherhouse. A light was shining from the door, through which Harry could see Mr. Brolly no longer fixed to his wooden stand, but moving freely about the room. When Harry entered the weatherhouse, he found it quite deserted. The only sign of Mr. and Mrs. Brolly were Mr. Brolly's umbrella propped up in a corner and Mrs. Brolly's bag, which stood in the middle of the floor. It was an odd place in which to find the bag, for Mrs. Brolly had always carried it with her wherever she went. For a moment, Harry stood and wondered about this. But then the bag began to rock to and fro, and a cross little voice said, "Blippy." It was the little thundercloud. Harry opened the bag and let him out. By way of saying thank you, the little cloud threw out 3 thunderbolts. The little cloud thought that they were terrible thunderbolts, but really they were just like sparklers that children hold in their hands at firework festivals. When the sparklers faded, Harry and the little cloud went outside to look for Mr. and Mrs. Brolly, but there was no one to be seen. The garden was still and quiet. Not a leaf stirred, and the only moving thing was a butterfly. High in the sky there hung 3 white fluffy clouds, as still as if they had been painted. This too was odd. Even on a lovely summer day, the weather does not stay the same from dawn to dusk. A gentle breeze might blow, and from time to time a cloud might drift across the sun. It was as if the Brollys had made the lovely weather and decided to have the rest of the day off, which is exactly what had happened. When Harry and the little cloud went down to the edge of the lake, they saw the Brollys' boat lying quite still on the water. Mr. Brolly saw Harry and waved to him. "My boy," he shouted, "we are becalmed. We have no fuel to burn to turn the paddle wheel, and there is no wind to fill our sail. Go to the weatherhouse and make a breeze." Harry and the little cloud hurried back across the garden. Once inside the weatherhouse, they looked at the computer. Just below the screen was the keyboard, and on each button was a picture of a snowflake for snow, a raindrop for rain. The thunder button had a cloud very like Little Cloud. But which button was the wind button? One had a squiggle on it, and one a little picture of 3 leaves drifting. Either or neither could be the button for the wind, but close by the button with the drifting leaves was a button with a smiley face. So Harry pressed it. At once, the smiley face appeared on the computer screen. "Hello," it said. "What can I do for you? Your wish is my command." "Please make a breeze to bring the Brollys home," said Harry. The computer took no notice of this whatsoever. "I've just made a little song about the wind. Would you like to hear it?" And straight away it began to sing.
The wind wakes up so early, he's got a lot to do. He's promised to fly kites today and dry the washing too.
"There," it said when the song was ended. "Wasn't that lovely?" "Yes," said Harry, "but it doesn't help the Brollys to get home. I want a strong wind." "Well, what kind of wind?" said the computer crossly. "There are many different winds, you know. There's the Mistral, which blows in France. There's the Chinook, which blows in Canada. There's the Pamperos in South America. The Simoon in North Africa. The Willy Willy in Australia. Which one would you like?" "I just want an ordinary wind," said Harry. "Oh, very well," said the computer sulkily. And at once, there popped out from a slot a small cardboard box. Harry lifted the lid. At first he thought that there was nothing inside the box, but then a little breeze rose up, ruffled his hair, and then whisked across the room and blew Wilkins over. Not to be outdone, the little cloud rained on Wilkins as hard as he could. "Please, sir, it's not fair, sir," said Wilkins. He looked exactly like a small schoolboy who has been teased and bullied by bigger boys. Harry picked him up and put him down on the step of the porch, where he could enjoy the sunshine and dry his petals and leaves. Then he went into the kitchen to see if he could find something which might help to bring the Brollys home. At first he looked in the drawers, but found only neatly folded tablecloths and packets of seeds. Then he opened the cupboard and found rows of storage jars and tiny pots covered with circles of paper held in place with elastic bands, and biscuit tins. Everything was carefully labelled in Mrs. Brolly's nice round handwriting. "Cheerful weather for a wedding," said one label, while another said, "Good weather for a fair." Harry couldn't resist lifting the lid of this tin, and the smell of candy floss drifted out, together with a snatch of fairground music and the sound of laughter. And then he saw the big glass jar with the label Old Ferocious. Beneath the name, and written in smaller letters, were the words, "A very strong wind, danger." It is usual to write the word danger in big red letters, and so Harry thought that the danger could not be very great, and he lifted down the heavy jar, put it on the table, and took off the lid. At once, out came Old Ferocious, roaring like a lion. It was much too strong a wind to merely bring a little boat gently back to the shore. "Please, come back," said Harry, leaning from the windowsill. "Come back to your nice jar." But the wind just roared past the window, banging the pane back and forth. Harry closed the window. As he did so, he felt the weatherhouse begin to tilt, and Harry began to slide across the floor. As he slid, he felt the weatherhouse jerk and shake as though it were being tugged by a giant hand. Then up it went. "Bloop!" cried the little cloud, and hid himself in Mrs. Brolly's bag. The little breeze slid down the crack in the floorboards. "Don't go," said Harry. For a moment, he thought he heard Old Ferocious laughing, and then suddenly he found himself floating, weightless in the air. The teapot and Mr. Brolly's umbrella drifted slowly past his face. Floating to the window, Harry found himself looking out into the darkness of outer space. Only a few distant stars were to be seen, until Wilkins drifted past. He was the only flower to go into space all by himself, and when, some time later, an American spaceship on its way to Mars took Wilkins' photograph and sent it to control at Houston, there was a great deal of excitement. Who had put this yellow plant into space? the scientists all asked one another. How had it been done? Many explanations were made, but no one guessed that it had been done by a small boy in pyjamas. Inside the weather house, Harry sat wrapped in Mrs. Brolly's quilt, trying to keep warm in the growing cold. Looking down at the quilt, he noticed 2 new patches had been sewn into the pattern. They showed the weather house in space, and Harry floating alone in the blackness, with the quilt wrapped round him. Mrs. Brolly's magic had made the 2 new patches to tell Harry what he must do. A cold shiver ran down Harry's spine, as wrapped tightly in the patchwork quilt, he walked out into space. With the quilt shaped like a rocket ship, Harry was able to zoom over towards Wilkins. He took the flower by its leaf, and together they made their way back to the safety of the weather house. When Wilkins was once more standing on his sill, Harry gazed out from the window. Far, far away, the planet Earth was spinning like a beautiful blue bubble. The sight made Harry homesick, and a tear ran down his cheek. And then his eye fell on the computer keyboard, and a button which he had never noticed before. It had a big red question mark on it. Harry pressed it, and at once the smiley face appeared on the screen. "Hello. You pressed the question button. Just state your question clearly, and I will do my best to answer it for you." "How can I get the weather house back to planet Earth?" asked Harry. "Planet Earth?" said the computer. "Wouldn't you prefer to go to Mars? We're quite near Mars, actually." "No," said Harry. The computer ignored him. "I could open a hat shop," it said. "I've always quite fancied a hat shop." "I just want to go home," said Harry. "Oh, very well," said the computer. "Just press the rocket button." Harry looked down at the keyboard, and sure enough, there was another button which he had never seen before. "Do you make these new buttons?" he asked. But the computer merely sniffed and switched itself off. Harry pressed the rocket button, and the computer began a countdown. Harry, meanwhile, had sat on a kitchen chair and was holding tight with both hands. Whoosh went the rockets, and the weather house began to hurtle toward the planet Earth, while the Earth itself seemed to rush to meet them. Little Cloud was turned into a completely round ball. He looked just like a fluffy dandelion. Harry laughed. The little cloud looked so funny, and they were, after all the dangers, on their way home. With a jolt, the weather house came down in its own garden. Harry threw open the door, and carrying Wilkins, he ran through the garden and down to the lake. In rushing back to Earth, the weather house had created a fresh breeze, and the Brollys' little ship was bobbing over the water towards the shore. Harry was longing to tell them about being in space and rescuing Wilkins, but as the ship drew near to the jetty, the sails seemed to billow out and cover him, and he awoke in his bed beneath the patchwork quilt. The wind was blowing round the house, and for a moment it seemed to be singing. But then it sighed, just like an ordinary wind, and flapped the curtains at the window. Harry smiled and looked up at the weather house. Mrs. Brolly was standing in the doorway. It was going to be a good, fine day.